Okay, we want to start by making a basic sash. This is a sash that I made to go with my Happy Cats, the kitchen cats dress. And it's nice thick sash, and I like to do them about this thick. So to do that, start off by, you want to start with straightening your edge of your fabric, which you just snip it and tear to make sure that it's straight. Sometimes when you buy it at the fabric store, it's just not straight. And then you want to get 6-inch portions. So I've already snipped these, but you snip them 6 inches apart, and then you just tear them. And that way you have, when it's woven fabric, it'll tear straight. Don't try this with knit fabric, but with woven fabric it should work. So now you have 3 strips. Next, you want to find out your middle of your waist measurement. So this is the part that's going to go across your tummy. So I do this by basically, I hold it up to my stomach and then I note the length. So this is 17 inches. So I'm going to cut one of the strips to 17 inches. Okay. And then I'm going to sew. That way you have a nice flat piece in the middle instead of having a seam right down your stomach. So I'm going to sew the right sides together, the short sides of the other 2 pieces on both sides of this middle piece, so that it'll be one long sash. So let's go to the sewing machine and sew these parts. Okay, this might seem like an odd question for those of you who sew regularly, but surprisingly enough, I get a lot of requests for people just to show them how to thread a sewing machine. And obviously not all sewing machines are the same, but a lot of them are very similar. So I have cone thread. I have it on one of these holders just to make it use longer, but you can also do it by putting a basic spool of thread right here. But if you're using the cone thread, you put it in over there. If you're using the spool, you would slip it right here, and then from that step it's going to be the same. You want to hook it through the tension, and then usually it's right to left, and a lot of times on the machine it'll show you where to go. So mine has little arrows. You just go down, up, and around, and there's a lot of times a little hook by the needle that you sling it through, and then you just feed it in the needle. And then with the bobbin, you want it to be, most of the time, mine has a little direction, but you want the bobbin to be winding counterclockwise. So you slide it in, you hook it around the tension, and mine has a little cutter, but if not, you just pull it back through, and then you can hold the tail of the needle, you go down, you pull up the bobbin thread, and you're ready to go. Okay, we're going to start by making our sash. I'm not pinning the edges, but you are welcome to. So we've got the short edge, right sides together with one of the longer pieces of the middle piece. And we put it in and just use a basic straight stitch. And make sure to back stitch at the front and back, and I use about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And then with the other short edge, you match it up to the other length, other strip of fabric that you have. And that should give you one long strip for your sash. Next, you're going to fold it in half on itself. And again, you can pin if you want, but I pin as little as I can. And I like to do an angled tip, but you can do it straight across. And so I like to sew it down at an angle, and I don't worry about being perfect with that. So kind of back stitch, sew it down at an angle. Then when you get to this edge, needle down, turn it, make sure your edges are lining up. Again, you can pin or iron it in place, but I find that with these straight pieces, it's just as easy to hold it and adjust and stop and adjust when you need to. Now, on this side of the sash, you left about an inch of usable fabric. So I'm going to stop about an inch from where the little selvage part ends. And that's where we're going to turn it under. Okay, now you want to turn this right side out. There are lots of ways to do it, but my favorite way is by using this loop turner. If you've never used a loop turner, I have a video showing exactly how to use it, but I'll walk you through now. But if you want a slower treatment, you can check that out. It's really easy. It does take a little practice the first few times, but once you figure it out, it will be a life changer. And you can use it to turn really skinny strips of fabric, which is hard with other methods of turning. But if you don't have one, you can use a bobkin or a safety pin or even a chop. And then I like to use that end to kind of stick it through and make sure my corner is nice. And then next we're going to iron the sash. Okay, so we're just going to iron this down into place. I'm going to start at the end where we tucked under, and we're going to form a point. And it doesn't have to be exact. It's a sash that's going to hang down by your bum. So if anyone stares at it too much, they're the weird ones. You can pin it in place if you like, but I am not a big pinner, so I just kind of iron and go. Okay, now your sash is done. So that's how you make a basic sash to go with any skirt or dress. We're going to turn this sash into one that's actually sewn onto a skirt. So let's go make the skirt. For the skirt, you want 2 pieces of fabric that are 44 or whatever the width of your bolt is. But I use the quilting cotton, which is about 44 inches by whatever length of skirt you want, plus about 3 inches for a hem. So I have that two pieces like that, and then we're going to sew the skinny edges, or the side edges, together, and then we're going to gather it. So sew both side edges down here just with a straight stitch, and then we're going to gather all around the top. We are sewing the side edges of the skirt together. Since it's the selvage edges, you don't have to worry about finishing it. Just put them right sides together and sew down the seam, making sure that you are on the inside of the edge if it has any printing. Back stitch at the front and the bottom, or the top and the bottom. You can pin this, but it's a gathered skirt. No one's really going to notice if you're slightly off or not. Okay, next I'm going to serge around the edges of the top and bottom edges of the skirt. If you don't have a serger, you can just do a straight stitch or cut your fabric with pinking shears. Okay, now we want to gather the top edge of the skirt. If your fabric is directional, you want to figure out which way it goes. I think this is the top of my fabric, this Riley Blake fabric, and I'm going to show you how to gather with my favorite cheater technique, which is my favorite way to gather anything that's larger than like a sleeve. So I do this for all the skirts that I make. Anything that's gathered that's kind of large, it would work for curtains. Anything that is a significant amount of gathering, this is a great trick for. Okay, so what you first want to do is set your machine on a zigzag stitch, just a regular zigzag, and then make the points as large as you can make them. And then you want to grab yourself some just crochet thread, just this thicker thread that they have at the craft store. I've also heard people use floss for this technique. And I like to do two separate sections, one for each skirt panel, one for the front side and one for the back side. That way I have more control over the gathers. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to zigzag over this thread. So if you need to slow your sewing down to have more control over it, you can do that. But do back stitch at the beginning. And I like to do it about 1/4 of an inch in. So just under my serging. You don't want to sew right on the thread because then you won't be able to pull it properly. You're basically making a casing around this thread so when you pull it, it'll gather up on you. But so you might want to go slow. If you have a machine like mine, you can set it to a slower or medium stitch speed. Whatever you feel like you have more control over. Okay, I'm going to zoom in for you guys so that you can see a little more of the detail of what's going on. Can you see that? And I'll show you when I'm done, a close-up, since I think the glare from the light is a little hard, makes it harder to see. either cut it or you can fold it. I just fold it because I'm lazy, but you do want it to be different so that when you're pulling it later, you don't have all the gathers just in the front or the back. And then make sure you're on both sides again. Then back stitch when you get to the other side, and then leave a long tail on the crochet thread. Okay, so this is what it looks like. See how you're going over it? And then when you go to pull it, how it'll just go through, right? It'll just gather up for you. Cool, right? Okay, let's go to the table and finish this skirt up. Okay, next you want to cut your piece of elastic. I'm using 1-inch elastic, and I just held, it really depends on how stretchy your elastic is. I basically held this to my back and stretched it all the way to see about how much I needed to stretch across my back to make it kind of hold in place. And this was my front measurement, which was 17, and the back one ended up being about 10 inches. So take that. If you have a front and back of your skirt, find the back of your skirt, but if you don't, it doesn't really matter. And then you want to mark the middle, fold your skirt piece that you've already sewn the gathering threads through. Mark the center back just with a pin, or you can use a disappearing marker. Mark the center back of your elastic. You can use a pen, or you can use a pin again. And now just gather up the back part. Remember, we have these long tails, and you can just pull it and watch it gather like magic. Okay, and then on this side, I'm gonna actually cut this so we don't interfere with the front skirt while we're doing this. And one little trick, if I have a bunch of gathering things, I like to put a pin in here and kind of wrap it around like you would an anchor on a boat, on a dock. That way it won't be moving on us while we're focusing on the other side. So I put the pin in, and I kind of wrap it, figure 8 it back and forth across the top and bottom of the pin. Okay, so here's the center of our back skirt. You can actually pin it to it. Pin it like that so it's easier to pull out. And then kind of put this in place. And I'm going to stretch it like that so that when you stretch to put it on, it has room to give. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's how far we want it to be gathered. Let me show you on this side. So stretch your elastic and then pin the edge to that side seam area. Where did it go? Right there. Oh, I need a new pin. So pin it to the side seam area. Then that's how far you want your gathers to be. So at that point, I would do the little anchor move on this part of it. Make sure that that's what it's on this side. It's not quite. I'll pull the gathering thread a little bit tighter. And then I'm going to do the anchoring move here again. Okay. This one came undone, so we'll do that again. Now, we want to distribute the gathers across the back. So just kind of even them out. Find the middle of this and the middle of this, kind of hold them together. We can pin them together. In the middle of, distribute your gathers, find the middle of this, the half part of this back skirt, middle of the half part of this back elastic, pin them together. And then when you go to sew it, we're going to actually be pulling the elastic so it's sewn down in a stretched out position, and then it'll gather the skirt back up when it's resting. So we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew that down. I like to use a zigzag stitch or a 3-step zigzag just to give it more give while it's stretching. So we're going to pull it while we sew and then zigzag across it. Okay, we're going to sew the elastic on. Make sure you're catching both layers and remember to stretch your elastic. We have this set to a zigzag stitch, but you can use a 3-step zigzag. See how I pull that elastic? Let's just actually, before we start it, let's just back stitch in place. And I'm gonna pull that out and we pull it, and then we just sew it in place. Just try to get your gathers to distribute evenly in the back. You can pin it more if you want. But this looks like this. And that's the back of your skirt. So it's all gathered up, but you can still stretch it over your butt. Okay. See how it looks? Zigzag. It's underneath there. Okay. Okay, so we've sewn up we added elastic to the back of our skirt. And now let's find the center front and put a pin there. And let's pin that to the center front of the band. There's the other. Okay. And now we're just going to gather all the way. We're going to pull it. Looks like I caught, oops, I'm trying to pull multiple things. Okay. So we're going to pull it. And that's what happens when you sew over one of the gathering spots. Okay. But we can still do it. Okay. And then we're just going to pin it into place. I'm going to pin this side, the seam of the sash, right over this, about, say about halfway down the skirt, the sash. Pin the skirt to the sash. So about halfway down. So if you look in the back, it will be covering about halfway. Let's move this center one to about there too. Okay. Then we'll just spread out our gathers and pin it into place. Okay, and now we do this exact same thing on the other side. So we have it pinned in the center. We're going to pull on the gathering string and see it goes much more fluidly because I didn't catch any of the crochet thread on that side. And then we pin it to about halfway up. Just make it about even to what it is on the other side. You can measure it if you are concerned about that, but my skirt is on the longer side, so it shouldn't be too noticeable if it's not exactly the same length all around. So you can pull it and distribute the gathers. There you go. Just pin it in place and then we're going to sew it down. Oh, actually I'm going to pin it on the other side so I can pull and see the pins easier when I'm sewing. And you do want to do the little wrap the thread around the pin trick so that your gathers don't come undone. I'm just going to do that to the edge where we had it wrapped before. And do it on this side too. Okay. And now I'm also going to pin this down just about maybe an inch over the elastic so that it is going to be sewn down in the back too. So about an inch on each side. About an inch there, or a couple inches. Okay, and now we're going to sew it down on the bottom edge. So just sew down right there. Okay, so we've got it all pinned in place. Now we just sew it. Make sure to back stitch. And I do sew with just a regular old straight stitch. And I'm going to sew as close to the edge of the band that I can get without having to worry that it's catching the band. So oops, that's still on the zigzag, so let's put it back on the straight stitch. garment that you are caring about the inside. If you care about that kind of stuff, you can finish it in a different way. But this is just a fast and easy skirt that the inside's not pretty, but it'll look cute from the outside. So you can pull that out easily. Okay, and since we have the raw elastic here, I think I'm just gonna zigzag it a little just so it doesn't get doesn't fray on us. But you could serge it before you put it in. That would be a good thing to do too. Okay, now we are just gonna hem the skirt. If you want to be nitpicky, you could probably measure from the top of the skirt to the hem, but I think I pinned it pretty much evenly, plus no one's really perfectly even on both sides anyways, so it's not like our uneven legs and uneven hips and all of that is really going to make a huge difference. So I'm just going to fold this up 3 inches. Every once in a while measure from here to here, and then I'll iron it in place. And since it's such a big piece, I'll actually pin it also. Let me grab. Probably work better with a smaller ruler, but this is the one that I have within reach. So about 3 inches. I just like to sew kind of along the serging edge. And yeah, that's all there is. Back stitch. Okay, let me show you how to put the skirt on. I just slid it over my up and over my hips on me, but that's kind of annoying on the dress form. So let's have her facing her back to you, and you just kind of put it on, get your skirt going. I make sure that the ruffle in the front is flapped up. And then I just tie it in a bow. And I was able to do this on myself, no problem. I just tie in a bow to whatever feels nice and tight. And then when it was on me, this kind of rolled while I was tying it. So I just kind of reached back, and then I kind of flap it open, and it'll cover the what is it called? The elastic good. And I just realized I didn't sew this down, so we'll make sure to sew that part down. But yeah, that's how it looks. Pull off all your extra little straggly bits. So that's how it looks from the back. A nice kind of full gathered skirt. And then from the front, looks like that. And you can wear it kind of low like that, or you can wear it up higher so that it's kind of more empire waist-ish. It's kind of fun and flexible in that way. Cute, right?